I know from my work as a psychotherapist, and I know from my history just as a person, one of the things that we are often challenged with is having negative feelings about ourselves and having low self-esteem, or oftentimes what we refer to in our field as negative self-talk. And now I want to talk to you about how to manage those things and how to overcome those things. And I'm going to share with you how I overcame mine. And I'm not perfect, and I certainly don't think I don't have flaws. But I will say I don't have negative feelings about myself anymore. I want to tell you how I changed that. So welcome back to the aha moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. Of course, I'm your host, Elliott Connie, and I've made no secret about it. My father was an aggressive, angry, abusive parent. I tell people all the time that though the abuse was often physical, the worst for me was the abuse that was verbal. And my father would often tell me that you were a piece of blank, you're never going to amount to anything, you're not my son anymore. He would say really horrible things that stuck with me, and I grew up feeling like there was something inherently wrong with me. I grew up feeling quite incapable. I grew up feeling like I was not worthy. So much so that it made me anxious, depressed, and suicidal. It made me really, really struggle. And I got to the point where I was really on the edge of taking my life. I was really, really close to that being how I ended things. And I came to the conclusion that I wasn't okay with that because I didn't want to die because of him. And I know that might sound silly or crazy, but I wasn't willing to let that be my reality. I didn't want to die because of my father. So I started thinking about, how do I fix this? And I knew that one of the things I'd have to do is think better and more positively about me. And I started practicing. I started thinking that I was worthy. I started thinking about what I had accomplished in life. I started thinking about what was good about me, almost like an exercise. I started thinking about what makes me me and what was good about me. I started thinking about all the people that believed in me and thought that I was good. I thought about my best friend's parents growing up. My best friend's name is Kyle. And I thought about his parents who loved and adored me. And I asked myself a really important question. What if they were right? What if the people who loved and adored me were right, and the person who was saying negative things and treating me negatively was wrong? What if the people who believed in me and saw something in me were right? And what if the people who thought that I was less than were wrong? And I decided the only way I can figure that out is to work as hard as I can towards a goal. And on the way to that goal, if I fail or realize I am incapable of achieving that goal, then that answers my question. But if I succeed, if I can achieve a goal that I've set out for myself and successfully accomplish the meaningful steps moving towards that goal, then the people who were saying negative things about me were wrong, and that somehow invalidates the negative things, which begins to rewrite the tape in my head. So that's what I did. The first meaningful goal that I ever decided to pursue was getting a degree in college. At the time when I had this thought, I was a year into college, and I wasn't doing very well, to be very honest. But by this time, I was a year in, and I said, I want to successfully graduate. And I started to focus. The next semester, I got a 4.0. I got healthier. I lost some friends because I decided some of these people were not congruent towards me achieving this goal. And I acquired new friends because I decided some of these people are congruent. And once I got that degree, and once I even noticed myself moving in that direction, I started feeling better about myself and realizing that when people say something negative about you, it's usually about them. And it invalidated the negative things I had heard and made me start feeling better about myself to the point where I don't really have negative feelings about myself. Again, I'm not perfect, and I have flaws, and every now and then those flaws show up. But I don't have the kinds of feelings about myself that cause me to think negatively about myself. And I hope me sharing this story today helps you do that as well. I love you, and I want you to feel good about you. I want you to be able to look back in your past for successes. I want you to be able to look back in your life for how you overcame things. I want you to feel good about yourself always, and I hope this message today helps you do that. So please share this podcast on your social media platform and help me reach as many people as possible with this message. And don't forget to subscribe. You can do that on Apple Podcasts, Google has podcasts, Spotify, Simplecast, wherever it is you enjoy listening to your podcast. And also become a Patreon subscriber where you can get bonus material and transcripts of these podcasts. I love you guys. See you tomorrow. Today I want to talk to you about how to manage yourself when people say negative and insulting things to you. It's so easy for when you hear someone say something negative about you, when you hear somebody say something wrong about you, it's so easy to internalize that. But I'm going to talk to you about how to not internalize it and how to keep thinking positively about yourself, because I think that's a really important skill. So welcome back to the Aha Moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. Of course, I'm your host, Elliott Connie, and I'm really excited to share this with you today, because the best advice I ever got in my life is when somebody told me, when someone tells you about your flaws, when someone says negative things about you, or when someone tells you about your limitations, they're lying or they're wrong. And I remember when I first heard that advice, I thought, how do you know they're lying or wrong? Maybe they are right. But the truth is, the person who gave me this advice was 100% correct. When someone tells you negative things about your flaws, they say negative things about you, or they tell you about your limitations, they are wrong or they're lying. And the reason that that's true is because people do not talk to you about you. They talk to you from their perspective of themselves towards you. So I'll tell you a quick story of what I mean. When I was getting out of graduate school, my biggest dream at the time was to have a private practice. I wanted to work in private practice and have my own therapy business. At that time, doing that was like the biggest dream that I could think of. In going on to accomplish that dream, I would talk to some of my colleagues and peers, and they would all tell me why it couldn't happen. No one pays out of pocket for psychotherapy anymore, they told me. No one would pay for solution-focused brief therapy, they told me. That's the kind of therapy that I do. No one will go see a black person for psychotherapy. Someone actually told me that. Their reasoning was because in graduate school we learned that clients want to see a therapist that looks like them. And in the area where I was at the time, it was predominantly white. And this person was telling me, you're not likely to get a lot of clients because of your race. They told me that it costs a lot of money. In order to start a therapy practice, you have to get a whole bunch of money and you have to get a big old loan and you have to do these big old things and all of that. Like, they literally told me all of these things. And perhaps the best thing I ever did was not listen to them, because I eventually went on to establish a very successful therapy practice. I went on to write many books, and I still have my therapy practice, but now the majority of the time I spend training psychotherapists and have the largest training organization in this field, which I wouldn't have happened had I listened to all of those people. The way that I've managed not to listen to them, because I realized you're not telling me about my limitations, you're telling me about yours. I realized you're not telling me about what you think I'm capable of. You're telling me about what you think you're capable of and transposing it onto me. And once you have that realization, you realize I don't have to listen to you because I'm not you. Maybe you couldn't have a successful therapy practice, but I'm not you. Now, my limitations are different than yours, and your limitations are different than mine. So for you to try to give me your limitations, it's inappropriate. It's wrong. It doesn't fit. The only way, and that didn't guarantee my success, by the way, the only way that I could figure out a way to be successful is to go out and find my limitations. That was the only way I could do it. The only way that I could get to where I wanted to be was to go out and find my limitations. The only way to do that is to push yourself, right? The only way to do that is to push and see what you're capable of. And it turns out I was capable of much more than I thought was possible, and certainly more than my peers in graduate school thought was possible. I was able to accomplish way beyond my dreams because I had a willingness to go find my limitations. So when people are saying negative things about you, no, you don't have to listen to them, because they're talking about their perceptions of themselves and they're trying to transpose it onto you. And it doesn't fit. Never has, never will. Go be you and let everybody else deal with it. Think about some of the people who have shared negative things about you, trying to bring you down. And I want you to just sit for a moment and thinking how wrong those people were. Just sit in a moment realizing that they were wrong and you really were so much more than they gave you credit for. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. I love you guys so much for listening to this podcast. Please share this podcast on your social media platforms or with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. It really helps me to help get the word out and means the world to me that you guys would do that. And don't forget to subscribe. You can do that wherever you listen to podcasts, whether it's Apple or Google or Spotify or Simplecast or wherever. Please subscribe and also become a Patreon subscriber where we share bonus material each and every week. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. One of the most important things when it comes to managing self-talk and managing negative feelings about yourself is actually your mentality. And I started building my mentality of managing my self-talk and managing like negative feelings, which we all have, from playing sports as a child. And I think sports is a wonderful reference point on how you can build your resilience against negativity, and I'm going to talk about that in today's episode. So welcome back to the Aha Moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. Of course, I'm your host, Elliott Connie, and I want to talk to you about building a really strong mindset. I want to talk to you about building a really, really strong, what my mentor calls mental game. And I want to talk to you about how I learned that as a youth and how sports is an opportunity to do this. The sport I was best at growing up was baseball. And I can remember baseball is an interesting sport because it's really about managing failure. One of the best games I had as a youth was the game I realized I was really good at baseball. And in that game, I hit a home run, I got a single, and then I got out 3 other times. So in baseball terms, we call that 2 for 5, which means 2 of the times I went up, I got a hit, and the other 3 times I got out. So that means I failed more than I succeeded in the best game I ever played. And in a baseball game, you have to manage your ability to focus on those successful times so that you don't feel like a failure. Like the times where you don't succeed are not as important as the times when you do succeed. In order to be good at baseball, you literally have to think that way. But I remember that same year, I was 12 years old, and we were playing a baseball game against a really, really good team. And they had a pitcher who threw the baseball what felt to me at the time like 1,000,000 miles an hour. And everybody on the team was afraid to go up to bat against this baseball player. His name was David Marshall. He was the best player around at the time. And everybody else was afraid, and they all went and they all struck out. And I convinced myself that I could get a hit. I remember being 12 years old and telling myself, I'm good enough to get a hit off this guy. And the reason I was telling myself that, it wasn't necessarily because I believed it, but the reason I was telling myself that is because I knew that everybody else was afraid and they were going up to the batter's box thinking, I'm going to strike out. And I was thinking, no, I'm going to go up to this batter's box thinking I can get a hit off this guy. And I remember going up to the batter's box. My coach said, Elliott, you get a hit off this guy? And I said, yes. And I remember he threw the pitch. I can literally close my eyes and see it now. And I got a hit. And I realized that part of succeeding is having the mentality of success. Part of succeeding is believing that you can, even if you're only believing that so that you can. The moment you start having negative feelings about yourself or doubt, you reduce the likelihood that you will succeed. If you're around me enough, I tell people close to me all the time, I'm allergic to doubt. Because just having doubt alone reduces the likelihood that you will pursue an endeavor and ultimately succeed. Doubt itself is the killer of success. So part of your mentality has to be to develop the ability to believe in yourself, even if you're only doing it to increase the likelihood that you will perform a task in a more successful way. So it doesn't matter whether you have these negative feelings about yourself. You can actually counter them by saying something positive about yourself. You can actually counter them by saying something uplifting about yourself. You can actually counter them by saying something about yourself that is positive. Because once you do that, literally just hearing yourself say it your brain will start to believe it, and you will have the ability to do more than you thought was capable. I cannot tell you the times in my life I've thought back to the 12-year-old Elliott who convinced himself he can get a hit off of the best pitcher in the league and thus got a hit. And I think in life, you need to believe in yourself before you can achieve the greatness that lives within yourself. So to unlock that internal greatness, counter those negative feelings about yourself and that negative self-talk by replacing it with positive things and saying things about yourself that are in line with what you're hoping to achieve. That's what I want to leave you with today. So I want you guys to practice that. I want you to, when you have a negative thought, when you experience doubt, counter it by saying something that is positive about yourself, even if it's at first delusional, and watch what happens to your capability. Thank you for being here today. I love you so much for taking the time to listen to this podcast. Please help me spread the word and share this podcast on your social media platforms or with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast wherever it is you enjoy listening to podcasts, whether it's Apple or Simplecast or Google or Spotify, wherever it is, go subscribe. You can also become a Patreon member where we release bonus content, which includes episodes and transcriptions each and every week. You'll love it. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you tomorrow. One of the most powerful ideas that holds us back when we are pursuing a meaningful goal and trying to accomplish something significant in our lives is something known as imposter syndrome. And I'm going to talk about the factors that contribute to imposter syndrome and what to do to overcome imposter syndrome so that you can become the person you want to become and accomplish the things that you want to accomplish. So welcome back to the Aha Moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. So first, let's dig into what contributes to imposter syndrome. A lot of us were not raised in an environment that grew our confidence. I talk openly about some of the issues I had in my childhood with an angry father who sometimes said things that were unkind and did things that were unkind. My father would be physical at times, and at other times, or simultaneously, he would be verbal. And I tell people all the time that I would rather take a punch than an insult because the insults lingered. The bruises and the difficulties healed, but the insults lingered much, much longer and led to me feeling a sense of I did not deserve good things to happen to me. And I can remember later on in my life when you get a degree and you get a job, there's this sense that like I fooled them. You know what I mean? Like I got a degree and I got a job and I'm working in the field of my choice, but one day they're going to realize that I'm not very good and I'm not very worthy and they're going to fire me. Like that's what that sense of imposter syndrome is, when our level that we've achieved in life does not match what we think we are deserving or worthy of, where our internal thoughts about ourselves don't justify where we are in the world. And it was a real struggle for me for a really long time. I remember when I got into graduate school, there were 44 people in my cohort. And I remember I sat in the back of the room and I remember sitting there looking at the other 43 students thinking, I don't belong here. I was grateful and appreciative that I was there, but I remember thinking I'm different from the people here. They are different from me. They are better than me. They deserve to be in graduate school and I do not. And I had to be determined to change that. I had to be determined to do something about that. And I had to be determined to do something about the way that I viewed myself. And I think the best way to overcome imposter syndrome is actually through hard work. Because in essence, I wanted to prove to myself that I deserved to be there. And I will never forget, there was a turning point moment. There was one class in particular taught by a very difficult professor. I mean, she's a wonderful person, but the coursework was very, very challenging. And I remember going into that class, and at the graduate level, you need to get an A or a B. You have to have A's to be in graduate. You were allowed, I think, 2 B's, right? You had to really be stellar. And I had never been a strictly A or B student, which contributed to my beliefs that I was not capable. And I remember going into this really hard class. Dr. Helmsley was her name. Again, wonderful person. Just a challenging course and challenging subject matter. And I took the first test in that class. And boy, that was the hardest test I've ever taken. Like literally, it was all essay. It took the whole 3 hours. And that was back when you were writing with like a pen and like your hand hurt. Those of you old enough to remember. And when we got the test results back the following week, I had gotten a 71, something like that, which is below standard for a graduate program. And I immediately thought, like, I don't belong here. But I started hearing grumblings around the room. Somebody said they got a 46, and somebody else got a 50, whatever. And I realized that my 71 was like the 5th highest grade in the class. And all of a sudden, I realized it didn't matter what I thought about myself. I was here, and I could work hard enough to prove that I belonged here. And that became my mission, and I never really struggled with imposter syndrome again, because I knew whether or not I saw the value in myself or not, I was here, and I could work hard enough to demonstrate whether I belonged to be here. And you know what? If I worked as hard as I could, and I didn't succeed, then that's okay. But I worked hard enough, and I realized I belonged there. Ultimately got a master's degree and went on, write books and become a psychotherapist and all the things. But that's how you overcome imposter syndrome, is working hard to prove to people that doubted you and gave you the messages in your life that you weren't worthy, prove them to be wrong. That's how you win. So have you experienced imposter syndrome in your life? Like, what did it look like? How did you overcome it? I want you to spend some time thinking about that and leave a comment. I'd love to hear. Thank you for being here. I love you guys so much for listening and taking the time out of your day. If you wouldn't mind, please share this podcast on your social media platform and help me reach more people, or even share it with just one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And also subscribe. You can do that wherever it is you enjoy listening to podcasts. Apple Podcasts is the most popular. There's also Spotify, Simplecast, Google has podcasts. Wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts, please subscribe, leave a comment, rate this podcast, and come back tomorrow. I can't wait to see you. Love you for listening. Talk to you tomorrow. So earlier today, I was teaching a group of people that are interested in learning to practice solution-focused brief therapy. There are a bunch of clinicians, and what I do and what I teach is known as solution-focused brief therapy. And we were talking about using this approach with clients that are really struggling. And one of the participants asked me a question that triggered a thought that I think is relevant to this idea of how do you manage negative thoughts and keep yourself becoming the person that you want to become. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, because I think it will inspire you. So welcome back to the Aha Moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. So look, life is really hard and really complicated. And I think sometimes we get beaten down and held down by life. And I think sometimes we struggle with what goes on in our lives, and we start believing negative narratives. And someone in the meeting essentially asked, like, but what about your clients who are struggling with really serious things that are like in their brains, like depression or ADHD? And I thought, well, you have to release the negative narrative, like even as the therapist, because underlying that belief is someone who has like an internal issue like ADHD or depression can't be happy and can't live a good life, which of course is not accurate. So we have to be aware of and fight our negative beliefs, our negative narratives, because they limit us, they hold us back. Somebody once told me that you have to make sure you protect what you believe about yourself, because you will only go as far as you believe. And I think that's true. When we have limited beliefs and we only believe that we're capable of these smaller things, and you're only going to accomplish smaller things. But if you believe you're capable of greatness, I mean true, epic, genuine greatness, then you're much more likely to achieve that level of greatness. But it takes that level of belief, and sometimes you have to fight the negative narrative. When I was growing up, I will admit openly that I had a negative, limited narrative. I couldn't imagine myself going to college. I remember sitting in study hall, my junior and senior year of high school. All my peers were like, filling out college applications. and they were going to university of this and university of that. And I never genuinely believed that that was in my future and I was capable of that. I thought that was for other people who could A, afford it, and B, perform on that level. What I'm so fortunate of is I played baseball. And I was a pretty good baseball player, so I got to go to college because I was a baseball player. And while I was in college, I learned the single most important thing that you need to know about yourself to be able to battle the negative self-talk. And it's so important that you do that because the world is going to give you plenty of reasons to doubt yourself. The world is going to give you plenty of negative feedback for you to believe in. And the number one thing you have to have is belief in yourself. And when I was in college, a professor, a woman named Dr. Marilyn Pugh, pulled me aside and said, "You are very, very bright. Have you thought about what you're going to do in your future?" And I said no. And Dr. Pugh told me, "I think you'd be a good psychotherapist." And at the time, I had no clue what a psychotherapist was. And I am so proud of the fact that I proved her right. And I proved my own negative belief system. I proved my own negative narrative wrong. But the simple truth is, I was capable of more than I believed in at the time. And I want you to understand that you are capable of more than you believe in. Like literally, just sit with that for a second. You are capable of more than you believe in. So you don't have to do anything to your capabilities. You have to do something to your belief. Make your beliefs match your unlimited capabilities. And if you have unlimited capabilities, then you should have equally unlimited beliefs in yourself, in where you're going, and what you can do, because you are greater than you ever realized. You are greater than you give yourself credit for. And I'm here to remind you of exactly that. So as we end this week and the topic of managing self-talk, I want you to realize the number one way to manage self-talk is to rise your belief in yourself to your unlimited capability. Love you guys. Thanks for listening. Please share this podcast on your social media platforms or with at least one person that you think would benefit from hearing this message today. And please subscribe to this podcast on whatever platforms you enjoy. Apple, biggest podcast in the world is Apple. Spotify, Simplecast, Google has podcasts. And you can also become a Patreon subscriber and get access to bonus content, including PDF downloads and bonus episodes. I will see you on Monday.